Imagine a vast cavern inside you, silent, shadowed, and forbidden. It is the realm you avoid, the voice you deny, the reflection you dare not face, yet within that cavern lies the seed of your purpose. Today, let us tread its quiet depths. There exists within every human being a region unexplored, cloaked in silence, where forgotten images, suppressed emotions, and disowned fragments of the self reside. It is not a land of evil, as the moralists would claim, nor a domain to be conquered by intellect. It is a living, breathing territory of the soul, subterranean and raw, ailing not for judgment, but for recognition. This hidden realm, though often perceived as a threat, is in truth the most honest mirror of what we are, and more crucially, what we could become. The part of ourselves that we exile into darkness, the anger we fear, the desire we cannot voice, the grief we refuse to carry, does not vanish. It waits, it grows in the silence, it stirs beneath the surface, speaking in dreams, erupting in projection, and coloring our relationships with invisible ink. But rarely do we stop and ask, what if this darkness was not a curse? What if it was a map? There is profound danger in dividing oneself into what is acceptable and what is rejected. The rejected self does not die, it rebels, and yet in its rebellion it offers something precious. A signal, a doorway, that which we repress becomes the key to our vitality, for within it is energy, vision, instinct. What we cast out is not merely weakness, it is often strength misunderstood. People wish to be good, and in their striving for goodness they often become hollow. They prune the branches of the psyche, trimming away aggression, spontaneity, passion, even sacred doubt, until they are left with a polite and brittle persona. But the roots of the tree grow in the darkness. Cut off from the shadow, we are cut off from the very soil that nourishes our individuality. To be whole, one must go downward before one can rise. The confrontation with one's shadow is not an act of indulgence. It is an act of courage. It requires stepping into the unknown with eyes unclouded by moral superiority or spiritual pride. It demands that we meet ourselves not as we wish to be, but as we are, contradictory, complex, unfinished. In that confrontation we suffer not because the darkness punishes us, but because we come face to face with the limits of our illusions. And in the breaking of those illusions, something more authentic begins to stir. Listen closely to your discomforts. They are the voice of the forgotten. Pay attention to your jealousy, your envy, your rage, not to indulge them, but to inquire. Ask, what have I not yet accepted in myself? What gifts have I buried because they frightened others? What emotions have I denied because they did not align with who I pretend to be? Within the shadow lies intuition, the raw, untamed voice of the inner world. It speaks in symbols, not logic, in images, not arguments. It dreams in the language of the soul, and it has been guiding you silently through every mistake, every desire, every moment of shame. It has not abandoned you. You have abandoned it. The great paradox is this: to find clarity, one must first welcome the murky. To know peace, one must embrace the war within. And to live with purpose, one must sit with the purposelessness that haunts the unlived life. For the shadow is not simply the place where darkness dwells, it is the birthplace of possibility, the ground from which true transformation emerges. Not change by force, but by integration, by remembering the forgotten, befriending the feared, and weaving back into the fabric of the self all that was once cast out. Only then does a man or woman become indivisible. Not perfect, but whole, not saintly, but sincere, and from that wholeness, purpose does not need to be sought. It arises, organically, unmistakably, as a path shaped not by imitation, but by inner necessity. So do not turn away from the part of you that disturbs you. It is not the enemy. It is the unlit candle waiting for your attention. Walk toward it. And as you do, you may find that the darkness you feared was never darkness at all, but the womb of your becoming. There is a grave mistake that many make on the path to self-understanding, the assumption that growth is achieved by discarding what is undesirable, by cutting away what is painful, by purifying the self through denial. In this illusion, the soul becomes divided against itself, light warring against dark, reason suppressing instinct, and the conscious ego presiding over the unconscious as a tyrant rather than a steward. But the human being is not a sculpture to be chiseled into perfection. The psyche is a living, breathing totality, organic, contradictory, whole, and wholeness cannot be achieved through rejection, only through integration. What one resists does not disappear. It withdraws into the shadows, into dreams, into the folds of the unconscious, where it operates unseen, shaping thoughts, emotions, and behavior. The denied parts of the self become autonomous. They do not submit quietly to exile. They protest, not through words, but through neurosis, projection, addiction, rage, or despair. The so-called unwanted traits do not die when banished. They return again and again until they are acknowledged. For the soul does not forget itself. There is a quiet wisdom in that which disturbs us. The impulses, fears, and desires we reject are not mere defects. They are fragments of the self, distorted by shame, misunderstood by intellect, and silenced by convention. But they are not evil. They are orphaned, and like all orphans, they long not to be destroyed, but to be brought home. The path forward, then, is not toward perfection, but toward inner reconciliation. To integrate is not to excuse, nor is it to indulge. It is to recognize that what is within you belongs to you. The aggressor, the coward, the manipulator, the seducer, all these figures live within, and yet each holds a truth. The coward reveals where the soul has been wounded. The manipulator reveals the hunger for influence when one feels unseen. The seducer exposes the yearning for union distorted by loneliness. To understand these forces is not to glorify them, but to liberate them from their distortion. Integration requires a different kind of strength, not the armor of righteousness, but the patience of introspection. One must descend into the personal underworld, face what has been hidden, and sit with it, not to conquer it, but to converse with it. To ask, why are you here? What are you guarding? What were you denied? And in that questioning, meaning begins to emerge, not simple answers, but threads of insight, threads that lead not to fragmentation, but to unity. Many believe that by rejecting their so-called flaws, they become better. But repression does not lead to virtue, it leads to disconnection. A person who suppresses anger does not become peaceful. He becomes passive-aggressive, seething beneath the surface. A person who represses desire does not become pure. She becomes rigid, her warmth trapped beneath layers of guilt. The integrated person is not free of darkness. They are in relationship with it. They do not act it out unconsciously, nor do they deny it. They know it, hold it, and in doing so, transform it. One cannot become whole without embracing the opposites within. The conscious and unconscious, the masculine and feminine, the creator and the destroyer, all must be seen, named, and woven into the tapestry of the self. This is no easy task. It demands humility, honesty, and above all, the willingness to let go of the false self, the persona crafted to please others, to gain approval, to hide the chaos within. But once that mask falls, what remains is real, a human being, unvarnished, vast, alive. This process is not linear. One does not integrate and then remain integrated forever. It is a constant movement, like the tides. Life will always present new conflicts, new shadows, new contradictions. But once the soul has tasted wholeness, it no longer seeks safety in one-sidedness. It becomes flexible, deep, and capable of holding paradox. And in that capacity there is freedom. The goal is not to rise above the self, but to become fully oneself. To walk into the depths and emerge not purified, but complete. to stop fighting the internal battle and instead become the ground upon which both warrior and enemy can sit. Integration is not a surrender of morality, it is the birth of authenticity. It is not a collapse into chaos, it is the cultivation of inner order through love, not through fear. Do not seek to cast anything out, seek instead to draw it in, hold it to the light, let it speak, let it grieve. Let it teach, and when it has been seen, when it has been loved, it will no longer haunt you. It will stand beside you, not as your shadow, but as your strength. There is a secret order hidden within inner chaos, a strange logic behind the torment of opposing desires, fears, and longings that live within the same soul. Most flee from this conflict, thinking it a sign of weakness or failure. But what if it were not a flaw? What if the friction between parts of the self was not an error to be corrected, but a signal, an invitation to meaning? Within every person there is a battlefield. One voice says, "Be safe," while another whispers, "Take the risk." One part longs for love and connection, another craves solitude and detachment. There is a hunger for creation, and yet a fear of exposure. These opposing forces pull and tear at the self, and many collapse under the pressure, choosing one side and silencing the other. But to silence conflict is to silence potential. True purpose is not born from the quiet spaces where all is resolved and peaceful. It is born in the heat of tension, in the crucible of contradiction. It emerges when one is stretched beyond comfort, when what we want and what we fear collide and leave us trembling. For it is only in the presence of real inner conflict that we are forced to ask, who am I, really? What am I meant to do with this life? The self is not a singular, consistent entity. It is a constellation, fragments, archetypes, instincts, memories, all orbiting around a center that we seek but never fully grasp. The friction between these parts is the very energy that fuels transformation. Just as fire is fed by opposing elements, so too is the soul ignited by the meeting of its contradictions. To feel torn is not to be broken. It is to be alive, and within that inner tension lies the path to authenticity, when we dare to feel the full weight of our uncertainty, when we stop running from the voice that contradicts our plans, when we allow both the noble and the base instincts to speak, we discover something unexpected. Not answers, but depth, not clarity, but truth. Many look outward to find purpose, in achievement, in recognition, in belonging. But purpose discovered in the outer world alone is often brittle, easily shattered when life shifts. Only purpose forged in the fires of inner struggle can withstand the tests of time, because it is not chosen, it is revealed. The soul does not seek comfort, it seeks wholeness, and wholeness cannot exist without conflict. The seed must crack before it grows, the night must fall before the sun can rise, the self must be divided before it can reunite on a higher plane. This is the pattern of all true development, not linear but dialectical, not peaceful but profound. In the moments when everything inside you seems at war, when no direction feels certain, when every choice feels like betrayal, pause. There is something sacred unfolding. A deeper self is trying to be born, and it does not speak in straight lines. Listen not just to the loudest voice, but to the one that trembles in the corner. It holds a piece of you that cannot be ignored. Every inner conflict contains a message. Every contradiction holds a clue. The part of you that wants to flee the world and the part that wants to lead it, the part that clings and the part that rebels, they are not enemies. They are fragments of a larger story waiting to be woven together into meaning. The task is not to eliminate conflict, but to descend into it with awareness, to ask what each part wants, what each part fears, and why. And as we do, something miraculous begins. The fragments begin to speak to one another. Understanding dawns. A synthesis arises, not a compromise, but a new vision that honors both sides. This is how the deeper purpose takes shape. not as a career or a label, but as a movement of the soul toward integrity. It is not always dramatic. Often it is quiet. It looks like a shift in perception, a new courage, a renewed relationship with suffering. It manifests not in words, but in how one lives, how one chooses, how one carries the weight of being with dignity. Conflict is not the end, it is the doorway. It is the sacred struggle through which the true self is carved from the chaos. Those who dare to face it, not avoid it, not numb it, not escape it, are the ones who emerge with purpose etched into their bones. Let the fire of your contradictions burn, stand in their light, and in time you will see. They were not meant to destroy you, but to awaken you. There is no task more demanding, and more necessary, than to face oneself. Not the polished mask offered to the world, nor the curated self-image maintained in mirrors and titles, but the raw, unvarnished being beneath it all. Most spend their lives in flight from this encounter. Not because they are weak, but because the truth of who we are is too vast, too ancient, too unresolved to be approached without trembling. Self-confrontation is not a philosophical exercise, nor a poetic indulgence. It is a reckoning to turn inward, to look unflinchingly at one's wounds, one's resentments, one's secret desires and failings, is to walk into the dark forest without a map. It is to step beyond the boundaries of certainty into a landscape shaped by shadow and silence, where the familiar tools of logic no longer suffice. The one who seeks to know themselves must first be prepared to lose themselves. For the self that appears at the beginning of the journey is rarely the one who survives its end. Ego, ambition, pride, identity, all are tested, not to be destroyed, but to be seen for what they are, surface forms upon deeper waters. It requires tremendous courage to sit with the emotions that have long been banished to the margins of awareness, the envy that burns quietly behind kindness, the fear masked as control, the sadness hidden beneath anger. Each feeling has a history, each symptom has a root, but these roots do not reveal themselves to the hurried or the distracted. They speak only to those who are willing to stop, to listen, and to feel. This inner courage is not dramatic. It does not roar like the lion, nor strike like the warrior. It is quiet, steady, persistent. It does not demand applause, because it knows the audience cannot follow. It is a solitude that must be chosen, and a suffering that must be willingly endured. For in confronting the self, one must also confront the pain of having lived unconsciously. The time wasted, the harm caused, the potential unfulfilled. These truths cannot be avoided without also avoiding the possibility of transformation. The false self, the one built from the expectations of others, from childhood defenses, from societal roles, does not die easily. It clings, it resists, it whispers lies about who we are and what we're worth, and yet beneath it something truer waits, not pure, not perfect, but real. The real self does not boast. It does not fit cleanly into categories. It is contradictory, complex, and full of unspoken yearning, but it is the only self capable of wholeness. The process is rarely linear. One descends, thinking the bottom has been reached, only to find another layer of fear, another buried memory, another voice long silenced. Each descent strips away another illusion. Each encounter with what was denied brings a kind of clarity that cannot be taught, only experienced. And what of the rewards? They are not riches, not titles, not safety. They are subtler and infinitely more valuable, a sense of alignment, of inner solidity, the quiet confidence of one who no longer needs to hide, the ability to act from truth rather than impulse, the capacity to love, not from need, but from presence. These are not gifts given by the world, but earned through the labor of inner honesty. To confront oneself is also to reclaim oneself, not just the strengths, but the instincts, the intuition, the raw energy that was once feared or labeled unacceptable. These aspects, when integrated, become power, not over others, but over one's own life. A person who has met their darkness is no longer ruled by it. They become trustworthy, not because they are flawless, but because they are real. And in time, this work becomes not a burden, but a calling. For once you have seen the truth of your own depths, you begin to see others more clearly. Compassion grows, not from ideals, but from experience. The heart softens not through preaching, but through having suffered and survived the fires of one's own making. There is no becoming without confrontation, no depth without descent, no freedom without facing the prison of one's own lies. The one who dares to meet themselves as they are, not as they wish to be, stands on sacred ground. It is there, and only there, that the path begins. So lean into your shadows, for they are not your condemnation, but your compass. In that deep, silent darkness lies the spark that will illuminate your purpose. Step into it, and you will find not an abyss, but your most authentic self.